TV, the voice for humanity.
Welcome to the American Foreign Policy, brought to you by Parrot TV. Today we're with Carlo Porcelli, my co-host. He's got a lot of experience in political activism, and he's based in Washington, D.C. Today we're going to talk about the Sandinista movement and government, as well as the Ranasir Act, which was just debated on the floor recently. What is it, and how does it relate to other issues related to the Sandinista? So, Carlos, tell us a little bit about what you have heard about this act.
Well, it's an abomination. It's stupid. I mean, I hate to be. I mean, let's face it. The goddamn Trump administration, well, it's the CIA, attempted another coup in Nicaragua in 2018. They killed hundreds of people. This Leopoldo Lopez that's being touted on this idiotic movie that showed on HBO, Alawuyi. He's one of the major leaders of the murderers that were in the CIA launch coup of 2018. So the Ranasir Act. Well, what kind of ethical grounds does the United States have for demanding human rights alterations in Nicaragua when they've got their fucking boot on their neck? Right. Fuck that. It's just stupid.
Blood on their hands.
Kind of hypocrisy, along with hoping that the American people are just as ignorant as they actually are to this sort of thing. It infuriates me.
So what is the Ranasir Act? Tell us a little bit about what are they even trying to accomplish with this? What is the goal?
Well, according to them, let's see, the legislation proposes new initiatives to monitor, report on, and address corruption by Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega's government and family, as well as human rights abuses perpetuated by Nicaraguan security forces. Who the fuck is the United States to make those kind of demands on anybody?
Right.
I mean, they can't even control their own rogue president, in Donald Trump. So, it doesn't even get that far. When has the United States ever given a rat's rectum about human rights? Ask the Cherokee. Ask the people in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. Fuck America with this shit. It's bullshit. I'm sorry. It shouldn't even be considered. I mean, these people down the road from me a few minutes are animals. They're murderous animals. They don't give a shit if it makes any sense. They don't care that they killed hundreds of people just a couple of years ago and have murdered thousands of people in Nicaragua and elsewhere in the world. So you get this movie, what's it called, Olawuyi, about Venezuela. But what do they have? They have this huge, supposedly opposition gathering, protest, and it's not them. It's not the opposition. It's actually a shot of the guy pro Hugo Chavez, pro Maduro, pro Bolivarian revolution gathering of, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. It's not even them. It has nothing to do with human rights. This is just another piece of bullshit. So that when I go on the line and kibitz with assholes, they get, socialism doesn't work. Well, give it a chance. It's like when I went down to the Venezuelan embassy when the people had taken it over, and I kibitz with the assholes from American University that had gotten USAID, NED training on how to raise a ruckus down there and block people from trying to help the people in the embassy. I asked this one kid, I said, why would you want the United States to invade Venezuela? And he goes, Well, because then if the United States invades Venezuela, it will fall faster. And I said, well, tell that to the fucking Cubans. You know, they're still around. 62 years, they're still around. The Sandinistas, 42, 43 years, they're still around. And now with Venezuela, it's been 21, 22 years. They're still around. When you're starving people, they're going to put up some resistance, no matter what kind of bullshit legislation you argue in this farce of a Senate and farce of a House of Representatives and farce of a government that we have in the United States now. It's utter bullshit. Everything is lies. Everything is involving the death of others. As we sit here right now, the United States is dropping bombs that are tearing the limbs off of 3-year-olds. And we're going to listen to these fucking animals about human rights in Nicaragua? Fuck that. You know?
What are the objectives here? I mean, in Latin America in general, all the coups that have been arranged, what is the United States and the policy attempting to accomplish by overthrowing socialist governments?
Well, to steal, mostly it's interesting because with Cuba, you have, of course, a huge history that maybe they want to turn it over to the mafia again. Maybe they want to increase the infant mortality rate again. I had a conversation with a woman about Cuba, face-to-face conversation. And I finally said, look, how many kids do you have? And she said 3. And I said, well, what if you lived in Batista's Cuba, where 2 out of the 3 of those children were likely to die before the age of 5? But now you had a government where it's not likely. In fact, it's more likely that the kids would die in Richmond, where you live, Richmond, Virginia, than in Cuba, you fucking idiot. So, and that shut her up. So that Cuba, obviously, there's a colonial history and that sort of thing. It's 90 miles. Nicaragua, it's a bit of a mystery because the Nicaraguans don't really have anything resource-wise. The United States has effectively blocked the Chinese effort to build a canal through Nicaragua. That's kiboshed for so many different reasons. And when we can discuss, the Belt and Road Initiative from China, the New Silk Road some other time at great length. But with Venezuela, it's obvious. It's the fucking oil. That's what they want to get back. And there's a lot of gold in Venezuela, and there's other rare earths. But it's basically to steal. That's what the United States wants to do. With especially Venezuela, they want to steal. Now, the Nicaragua and Cuba, it's like Noam Chomsky said, they're the threat of a good example. They're here they got Uncle Slimy. I don't want to call him Uncle Sam. It's Uncle Slimy's boot on their neck, and still the infant mortality rate goes down. Getting back to Nicaragua in 1978, when the Sandinistas defeated the Somozas, the World Bank came out with a report, and they said, well, the Sandinistas, my God, not only are they trying to make an effort to pay back a $5 billion loan which the Somoza family stole along with a bunch of U.S. corporations. They just stole U.S. taxpayer money, $5 billion. They're going to make an effort to pay it back. I do remember watching a PBS program with John Rockefeller, and he was asked about the Nicaraguan debt. And I think $300 million was due, and they didn't have $300 million when they took over. There wasn't even $15 in that bank. And he said, oh, if they don't do it well, we know how to deal with them. Yeah, that's right. Well, a little moment of clarity there. So what happened was the World Bank comes back and they say, look, this report, Sandinistas are doing a great job. They're making headway in education. They're making headway in literacy, healthcare. The agriculture's up. They ticked off about 8 things. So what does the Carter administration do? He sicks the CIA on them. And it gets worse with that fucker Reagan, that piece of shit. and all of his criminal element, all of these goddamn bastards, these animals, these murderers that live just down the road from me. I mean, you know, the fucking the Regans and the Rumsfelds and the Cheneys. You know who I mean.
No, absolutely.
They don't care about people. They never gave a rat's rectum about people and human rights or any of that shit. So then we get Iran Contra. We get this huge so-called scandal. We get the Southern Front in Costa Rica with John Hull and his piece of shit ranch running, you know, arms and mercenaries out of it, but running drugs out of it too. That was the CIA. It was the CIA drug rest stop before they hopped into Miami. Now it's Honduras. Well, fucker Obama, that piece of shit. He and Miss Clinton and Mr. Biden launched the coup in Honduras in 2009. So now that's another big drug conduit because the CIA has got to pay for its black budget, and that's the way they paid for it for, you know, since the beginning of their existence in 1952 with Truman, that idiot, signing them on. So, you know,
I'm curious though. It's interesting. You mentioned the advances in Nicaragua. What do you think they were doing that improved the country?
What I think they were doing to improve the country?
Not the United States, but the government of Nicaragua, the Sandinista government.
What were they doing?
Yeah,
well, they initiated a literacy campaign where the rate of literacy went up dramatically. It was very effective. They opened health clinics, which the Contras came along and burned down at an enormous rate. They opened many schools, which the Contras came down and burned down, and killed the teachers. They reorganized agriculture around communes, which improved the agricultural situation. They gave subsidies to fishermen and expanded fishing rights. They did dozens of things to improve the condition of people. Infrastructure, built roads to previously inaccessible places. You know, that was just basically what good government would do. What the United States can't stand somebody doing on their own. If it's not U.S. corporations supplying all, you know, sending all the supplies, sending all the fertilizer down, sending, you know, all the seeds that can't germinate down, that have to be. Look what happened to India. Now that it launched a generation of suicides among farmers in India. The fucking greening of India. It was bullshit. And any agronomist who was aspiring to get through second grade knew it was horse shit. But, you know, you bribe people in the Indian government, the CIA and the U.S. corporations have huge amounts of money to use to bribe these people. And there's no brakes on the bribery because that's the way the United States is. It's a rogue country. It's a rogue nation. It's full of criminals. It's just a one big criminal enterprise. And so now you've got these people who can't pay back these huge debts in India, just like a lot of small American farmers. And the suicide rate goes up. That's a form, people despair. But to think that the fuckers down here in that big marble juicer we call the Capitol give a rat's ass about human rights. Oh my God. I was disabused of that notion when I was 3 years old. Good Lord. And I got to tell you, I encounter people every day that I talk to. I talk to people every day that still believe that there's some efficacy to that whole notion, whether it's Democrat, Republican thing, or any of it. I'm sorry. I should let you talk for a bit.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of interesting things that I find fascinating about the Sandinistas. Are there any parallels to what's the policies that, say, the Biden administration with the Ranasir Act and the previous policies in 1979 as the Sandinistas took control then? Are they practicing the same attempts to subvert the government in the same way, or is there any kind of new additions to that family of policy?
Well, it's what's up. It's brain. No, there's no difference. In fact, you can really keep it simple. I mean, it's very simple. The formula is exactly the same. On the one hand, you try to devastate the country. I mean, you see that in the Middle East. But on the other hand, you make demands of it that you yourself have no intention of keeping, and even when those demands are met, still they weren't even the point. I mean, there's no satisfying it. The only thing that would satisfy U.S. foreign policy makers and their betters, that's the corporations that control them, is if everyone in that country had all the blood sucked out of them and dropped over dead. And then the corporations were free to enslave another group of people and then go in the country and take out all the resources. Just loot the country. So if you don't, all you have to do is all they want to do is loot. And that's the answer. That's U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell. Loot, loot, loot. That's what imperialism is. That's the definition of it. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Are you aware that 26 countries of the AOS have signed on to an order to the extent that they believe that Nicaragua is practicing human rights abuses, imprisoning opposition, journalists, so forth? What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, the OAS was bought by the United States, and now they've got that. I think he's Venezuelan. I can't remember his name offhand. At the head of the OAS. Well, they've been shoving money up his ass for years.
Wow.
And it's how hard is it to buy the OAS? All you have to do is to look at the political situation. Look at Brazil. The United States got together with that asshole Moro in Brazil, the Attorney General, and they conjured up this notion of the car wash against Lula da Silva. The most popular fucking politician in the country, bar none. He would be reelected tomorrow if there were an election in a landslide. And he did a lot of good for Brazilians. And the standard of living went up, and for the most part, they were very happy with him. I think his approval ratings were in the 80%, which 82, 83, 84, something like that. So the United States get together with the Attorney General, and they concoct this car wash thing. And he and his protege, I can't remember, Dilma Rousseff, are thrown out of office as a consequence for I mean, the thing against Lula was so ludicrous that he was supposed to have accepted this tiny apartment for as a bride. I've seen the fucking apartment. It's like nothing. So that they got rid of him, and then we end up with this fascist in control of Brazil right now. So that's the complexion. Is there's always this tug of war between this huge, powerful economic, military behemoth full of pig fuckers who don't give a shit about human beings. They'd slit their own children's throat if it made them an extra buck. Against these poor countries, Nicaragua. When I was embroiled in the Iran Contra thing with the Christic Institute and with certain with certain left wing groups in Central America, like CISPAS, which is the Committee of Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, which is another story, another bloody story, as they all are. When I was involved with those people, it was essentially the same situation. So nothing's really changed. It's just I kind of lost my train of thought, but this brutality goes on. But it's a push and pull. So when you get people, just a few years ago, there was a kind of so-called revolution taking place in Latin America. You had Korea, you had you had the post-Pinochet change. It looked like the Argentinians were finally going to figure out they don't want to elect people who install these austerity programs that give all the money to Wall Street. I'm trying to think. Uruguay still has, as far as I know, a government that's leaning left, and of course you have Bolivia, you have Ecuador. So at that point, that's when the emergency lights go off, and Elliot Abrams, a pig of the first order, he gets called on. You have Trump bringing John Bolton on, who never saw a baby he didn't want to kill, and people like that, and the screws were put back on Central America and South America and the Caribbean, and they just bought off the OAS. They just put people in place that when it was convenient to put them in place, that would take the money. It's just the bribes are just astonishing. You want to play the game, you can get rich very quickly.
I'm curious, in your opinion, why to certain people that are bought off in this capacity, why is money so important to them? I mean, give me billions of dollars, and it's like, for me personally, I mean, call me naive, but you give me billions of dollars and tell me you're going to be killing all these people, and I'm just going to be like, no, I can do without it. So why these kind of people, why are they so easily bought off?
Well, now we're getting into the area of sociopathy or
yes,
psychos.
Yeah.
It's clinical. It's a clinical thing. I mean, one of the interesting things, I don't want to get too personal here, but our bookstore used to be in Upper Northwest Washington on Connecticut Avenue, next to the Avalon Theater, and that's an upscale neighborhood. It was an excellent choice if you wanted to tap that money. We weren't stupid about we understood location, but when you got Mrs. Krauthammer in that place, or George Will, or Richard Pearl, or any of these assholes, you could smell the rot, and it wasn't just that. Chris Matthews, Stephanopoulos, any of these dicks, they're just the errand boys and girls. Those are just the errand boys for the rich, and that just reeks. It just reeks of just give me the paycheck, just give me the money. We have a friend that does great impersonations, and he would see one of them in the store and he'd go, paycheck, and there's this legion. There's hundreds of lesser known people like that in that area, and they're just disgusting. Wow. Sellout. I mean, they're great. There were great people. Julian Bond, for example, and Daniel Ellsberg. They were, and then Lou Wolf, who had covert information, the covert action information bulletin that he changed to Covert Action Quarterly. We had, and Bill Balloon lived in an apartment right down the street from us. The guy that wrote Killing Hope and Rogue Nation. We had those kind of people, really good people, but by and large, a lot of those people really snotty, and really just, you could tell they were prepared to take the dollar over any kind of ethical concerns. They just don't give a shit about baby killing. It's like my wife likes to say. She says, they always ask you, we know you're against baby killing, but what are you for? So that's kind of sums it up.
Interesting. So, I mean, obviously, I mean, for me or you or somebody, an average person, thinking in terms of like, if we're going to, if somebody tells us this is the consequence, but if you take this money and you get this power, for an average person, I mean, I'm sure we'd have a crisis of conscience even being offered something like that. But obviously there are people that are very distorted in their medical condition, I guess you could call it, to be a euphemistic language there. And so, I mean, there are probably a lot. I mean, there's tons of these kinds of people, and they're more common than I imagine than most people think. I think there are probably some very highly narcissistic dark triad types amongst the average population as well.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, we would argue, what if we could eliminate these people? And he said,
Yeah.
there'd be other people lining up around the block to replace
That's
them.
my question too.
And it's very, that's interesting because it's a good segue into the thing on Nicaragua that I wanted to point up, because to get this money, to get this bribe money in these positions where you can just make oodles of cash by sucking up to very powerful and very wealthy people, you don't have to have a brain in your fucking head. Because I'll read this thing to you. It's from an article by Ben Norton from the Gray Zone.
Okay.
The title of the article.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I read this article. They were just obscenely stupid.
Amazing. Let's give the audience a taste of this.
Absolutely.
The article called "U.S. Congress Outlines New Phase of Economic Attacks and Hybrid War on Nicaragua's Sandinista Government." Once they want this stupid Ranasir Act, and they're still attacking in new ways and doubling down on their attacks with Nicaragua. And Nicaragua is supposed to improve its human rights. Jesus Christ, give me a fucking break. That consumption is for the people who didn't get past first grade in political science. Now here's this woman. I thought I wrote down her name. Oh yeah, Emily Mandrala. She's the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary. This is Emily Mandrala. And at this conference, this meeting they had to work out this new draconian plan against Nicaragua, she said she comically referred to Nicaragua as an island. Nicaragua. She was apparently mistaking it for Haiti. And then the guy that corrects her is, how stupid can you be? I mean, that would be something if I went out to the grocery store and I started with a microphone and a camera and I started asking people about Nicaragua, maybe only 2 out of 10 could locate it on a map. Okay. Like my cousins that went to Vietnam.
Policy decisions, though. That's the good news.
Yeah, right. That's the good news, right? But then the guy that corrects her, this is what he says. See if I can find this. Maybe not.
We're watching the American Foreign Policy Parrot TV show. Thanks for joining us. Leave a comment for us. Tell us what you think. Question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's just drop that. I can't find it. But this other guy, he goes, other participants made similarly absurd comments, demonstrating their ignorance of the reality on the ground in Latin America. Congressman, and this is not Congressman, Harry Whitebread. This is Congressman Juan Vargas, for instance, farcically insisted that Fidel Castro, who died in 2016, is still alive and in power in Cuba, and he's been there a long time. He still thinks Castro's alive. Jesus fucking Christ! You could put, they used to run the Fern plant or something for president. You could put, you could fill the fucking Congress, Senate, and House with ferns and have a higher IQ. These are killer ferns. These are ferns that will vote for a military budget that's used to rip babies apart every day, every fucking day. And it's more than the other 8 or 10 or 13, however you want to calculate, other countries combined. That's insane. Of course, it all comes down to the money. It's not like that money is used for arms. It's and a better military. They haven't fucking won a war in decades. In fact, if it wasn't for the Soviet Union, we'd be goose stepping now. It's fucking idiots. So they, you got this situation where you have these idiots in control. I lost my train of thought again, but I'll have to. It'll come back.
I have a question. Yeah, I'll separate and we'll go back to whatever you're thinking. I was going to ask, and I mentioned this earlier to you, the mosquitoes and the Sandinista government in 1979 displaced a lot of them from their land. They were the native people. They were of British heritage, as well as some of the slaves that had escaped from the way back in the 1700s and so forth. So how do you respond when we say human rights violations? Would this be an example, and how do you respond to that, to the treatment of the mosquito native people there? And
well, I warned you earlier, but my response would be, and it's still the same. It hasn't changed the last.
Go for it.
Fuck them.
Hear it.
Fuck them. I mean, what their first concern should be. Their first concern should be keeping Uncle Slimy out of Nicaragua. Mm-hmm. They should, and let me tell you something about the so-called Sandinista encroachment. Mm-hmm. That had to do with protecting the eastern coast of their country, which was under invasion by the Contras, who were not only coming out of northern Honduras and southern Honduras and northern Costa Rica, but they were coming in by sea. As they on the other side, on the western side, the fucking CIA mined the harbor. They mined the harbor at Managua. I mean, that, talk about a war crime. So they had to constantly deal with that because the Contras were landing mercs all over that coast because it's jungle and they could infiltrate easily. So the Sandinistas, their role was that. But when it came to the land, that was people from Nicaragua who were seizing the land to turn it into agriculture or mining enterprises. And the Sandinistas, even under the kind of siege they were under, addressed that and attempted to address that. They set up courts to review the leasing rights and the property rights. And they tried to do the best they can. But with Uncle Slimy on your neck, what kind of a job can you do? You can barely get around to feeding your people. Ask the Venezuelans. The Venezuelans, all I hear from everybody I kibitz with, all the way to CNBC and those dumb fucks, or Fox News and those cripples, is, well, it was the richest country in South America. Yeah, it was the richest country, but 75% of the population was living in abject poverty. And it was so bad that in 1989, I think it was, 88 and 89, they had the Caracazo, which were bread riots because people were starving in the richest country in South America. You're starving. And of course, Hugo Chavez won in a landslide. The Wall Street was starving them. Huge oil revenues flowing in. But Wall Street was stealing everything, not putting a penny back in, except for the few rich oligarchs that they bribed to do that. Jesus Christ, this is not, what's the thing people go, this is not brain science and they confuse it. That's what this is not. This is not those two cliches being tangled up. This is easy shit. If you have an ethical bone in your body and you can see right through this, it's not difficult. The delusion that Americans have, born of ignorance, can be stunning. But I can put people in their place easly. I mean, I don't want to give examples. I could give many examples, but people will say the stupidest things, like, well, why is everybody wanting to come to America? Well, I point out, well, look, let's take South Vietnam, for example. In 1966, when they were trying to draft me and Muhammad Ali and failed, at least on my part, there was 37 million people, I think, in Vietnam at that time. Now there's 96 million. Unhappy people don't fuck that much. They just don't fuck that much. And if all of them wanted to come here, why, even with a good fuck rate among Vietnamese who live in America, are there only 1.6 million here when there's 96 million back at home? So shut up about everybody wants to come here. There's a new Gallup poll. 33%, no, it's higher than that. 40% of American women 30 and under said they'd like to leave the United States. Well, if I was a woman, I could see that, because look at the men. You got, they're just assholes. They're just, that on the one hand, they're just a bunch of dicks running around with guns. And on the other hand, they're just a bunch of dicks ripping apart children with drone strikes. So if I were a woman, I'd probably be out of here, especially a younger one. God damn, what a hellhole this must be for them.
So what about the immigrants coming from south of the border? What is the issue concerning that?
What is the issue? Well, first you destroy their country. Take Haiti. Let's take Haiti, because we have Father Aristide, Father Jean-Bertrand Aristide, elected in landslides. But both times he was elected, he was removed. They took him out. Get out of here. And Clinton put him back, but it was half-hearted. We gave him Papa Doc and Baby Doc and the Tonton Macoute, which just slaughtered them and tortured them for years, and made their lives a great misery, just like Pinochet in Chile and all of that. It's just common knowledge and really you just have to have a little heart. You just have to have a little morality. But that's it. Haiti has been, ever since the slave revolution, ever since Toussaint Louverture and overthrew the French aristocracy in Haiti, and the French, ended slavery in Haiti. The United States has been after them. It's been unbelievable. Sometimes you think, wow, they've been after Cuba for 62 years. They've been after fucking Haiti for nearly 200 years. And they're not going to cut them any break either, And so, of course, people want to come here. The belly of the beast, or some other place. I mean, there's immigration problems in Europe. There's immigration problems in South America. If you want to talk about it, we can even say, gee, after World War II, the Germans had South America had a great immigrant problem with Germans. They had all kinds of lovely Germans coming over there. So why would anybody be surprised that there's been so much torture and rapine in South America when all those Germans came over there? Why would anybody be surprised that there's such belligerence here when so many Germans came over here? So, after World War II, they were Nazis, Operation Paperclip. So you've got some evil people, and you've got some ignorant and naive people. Now, what you say is interesting, because it's been the thing has been, if you could educate these people, they would adopt your they would adopt your point of view. But the fact of the matter is, that's a much more difficult process than is possible, especially with the relative material well-being here in the country.
So you think that there's a little bit of they drug us with. I use the word drug. They kind of drug us with leisure and a little bit of some goods, enough that we were kind of satiated and not a little brain dead, not to think outside of the general sphere out there, the problems going on in the world that they themselves are adequately interacting with and causing.
Well, you're going toward Thorstein Veblen then. Let me say one thing. You have, in 1928, Edward Bernays wrote propaganda that Joseph Goebbels used and the Nazis used. And It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't the Nazis and then Edward Bernays wrote propaganda. It was Edward Bernays wrote propaganda and the Nazis adopted it. And I think the fact that modern advertising and materialism segues so easily into propaganda. And we were going to talk about this on another show, in the context of Bannon, but also in the context of the CIA lies. CIA lies have set up Bannon for lies. They both take elements of the left wing and twist them. This notion of human rights, for example, in this stupid congressional proposal. They just take human rights. They're not interested in human rights, but they can take the language of it. And I've known dozens of people who gave their lives. Not necessarily get killed for it, but they spent their entire lives fighting these fucks. So yes, I think the material well-being has a lot to do with it, but I also think that Americans, number one, they're stupid, and We're
going to take a short break. I believe we would like to have a little commercial here.
When you see that during a pandemic, employees come in spite of the danger to their families, when you see that someone fires a pregnant woman, not merely saying you don't respect the employees, you're saying you don't respect the babies and our families and our community. That's what you're saying. That's right. And if we just see...
I'm Eric Adams, and for me, this is where it all began. Some people talk about police brutality. I want to tell you how it is to live through it. We moved from Brooklyn to Queens when I was young. It was not always easy. As a child, I'll carry a garbage bag full of clothing to school, afraid that we would be evicted from our house for not paying the mortgage. When I was 15, my brother and I fell into trouble. We were arrested, and we were brought here to the 103rd Precinct in South Jamaica, Queens. One of the police officers stated, "How do you like a beatdown?" He brought us downstairs and he beat us. He kicked us over and over again. When my mom came to get us, they said, "Leave them. They'll never amount to anything." That was a dark place. My life could have gone a different way, full of bitterness, but I had people who loved me and a determination to change things. So I became a police officer to bridge the gap between us, to make us all safer, and to take on systemic racism from within. It's why I took on police brutality while I was a police officer myself. Why I became a state senator to take on corruption and fight for civil rights for everyone. Fighting the rights for individuals merely to marry the people they love. And why I'm proud to serve as Brooklyn Borough President to make local government work for people again. We're in a dark place right now, a dark moment for New York and America. Whether it's the pandemic or violence in our streets, we don't feel safe. And too often, city government makes things worse with inefficiency that leads to inequality and holds our people back. But I learned some time ago, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you're not buried, you're just planted. The question is, what are we going to do with the fruits of our harvest? I say it's time to grow, and that means it's time to rise up.
I'm fired up! I'm fired up! The fight can't only be in the streets, it must also be in the agencies that patrol the streets. That is how we change policing. Over 600 shootings since June, and we have yet to see a comprehensive plan to stop having these communities live in terror. You do us no good merely walking down a block with us. You do us good walking into our businesses and giving us the economic stability that we can continue to grow. We will not allow the...
Welcome back to the Parrot TV show's American Foreign Policy. We have Carlo Porcelli. So let's continue along the lines. Kind of a dumb question here. It seems that the Democrats are very proud of their image as civil rights leaders and civil rights advocates. Why do you think there's that schism between Republicans and Democrats, culturally speaking?
Oh, well, it's the Republicans are just full of racists. It's just look, I grew up in an Italian family, and much of the neighborhood was Italian, and to a household, everybody was racist against blacks and anti-Semitic. There was just that was just in the water, was in the DNA, and I think a lot of those people have gone that way. I mean, it's the old thing. Huey Long said something to the effect that, you could maybe it wasn't Huey Long, but it was some Southern politician, might have been LBJ, that basically said, you can get these crackers to pretty much do anything you want if you tell them that they're better than black people, or that black people were getting a little break when they weren't. And of course, the way policy has been couched, especially by the Democrats, it can easily be twisted that the blacks are getting an advantage. So, and it's easy for the idiots to forget that on the right, to forget what African Americans have been through. It's like that. Somebody sent a little photograph along yesterday that came up on my feed, and it was just a picture of this young white student yelling at a black student who wanted to basically go to university in Alabama. And the thing below was, this is why they don't want critical race theory, because they don't want this to be remembered. It was much more humorous than I'm putting it, but that's the whole thing. It's forgetting. It's like history started like today. It's what Theodore Adorno calls the ahistorical lack of context. And Americans are fatally diseased with that. And it's like what's happening now has all the meaning attached to it, and history doesn't matter. I'm not really very articulate on the subject, but I have that sense that it has some interplay, and plus the facts that white people are getting shafted, working white people are getting shafted. Of course, the answer would be from me was, well, fucking unite with everybody else and make yourself a serious majority and get these fucks out. But I also know that that's a little naive on my part, because the shysters in this country, the hustlers, the liars, the murderers, and the thieves are just so in the ascendancy, constantly in the ascendancy. Since the beginning of this place, and it's been set up that way constitutionally. It was set up for hustlers and thieves to thrive. So there's not much.
Like a similar process when they had the indentured servants were mostly white people, and then you had the black slaves, and they're saying, well, these guys are taking your jobs. You're not able to get afford in advance because of the African Americans here, the slaves. And so it seems like it's a very similar, divide that's being stoked, to a certain extent. We're much more economically better off and freer than we were because of civil rights movements and various protest movements. But I think that a lot of the conditions, the root conditions, are, very much still present. And, these divisions are still being pushed, especially like through identity politics and the racial questions and stuff going on. And obviously, there's a different history for a African American versus my background or somebody else, but they forget the class consciousness. People forget the class consciousness in this process, and it's very much when you see the Democrats and Republicans fighting over, who's the more civil party, or who's pro black, or who's pro Hispanic, or whatever, and it's all of this stuff. And I mean, obviously, we know a lot of the times Republicans just out and out anti-immigrant. And there's a whole list of things I have against them, as well as the Democrats. But it's very those divides are so deep, it seems, that they're so easy to play off of. I mean, how do we, in your opinion, I'm going to ask you this as someone on the far left, how do we develop class consciousness within people that are maybe say active in politics but aren't aware that when you get into these racial divides and things, how do we develop more of a class consciousness that's working class to fight these oppressive powers?
I don't know the answer to that.
Either. I mean,
I have to, there are a lot of problems that there are a lot of hurdles.
mm-hmm.
And I think this comes back to materialism. Mm-hmm. and American materialist interests. I mean, mm-hmm. we were one of the things you sent along to me was that article by Henderson.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. I love your thoughts on that.
Well, I thought it was idiotic.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I thought he'd had some bad experiences. And I'm sure if I went to Yale, I would have had some bad experiences too. Yale was not open to me. I did not have that opportunity in
mm-hmm.
any way, shape, or form. But my daughter did go to Brown, and she had some bad experiences there. Yeah, mm-hmm. It's true. And she also went to National Cathedral School, which was way above my pay grade, but she went on scholarship, and she had some terrible experiences there, not fitting in. So I understand that. Mm-hmm. But what I think he doesn't understand is the seediness of materialism.
Mm-hmm.
In my neighborhood is primarily African American, mm-hmm. and second the group is Hispanic. So I go, when I go to out anywhere, I'm running into women that have spent like $200 on their nails. So this guy wants to point out to me that somebody's wearing a $900 jacket because their daddy can afford it. Look, you want to see some well-dressed people that have gone the extra mile in getting expensive and good-looking clothes. It's the people in my neighborhood who mm-hmm. don't have the money to do it. They work their asses off to stay there. I mean, it's not unusual to hear people working 2 or 3 jobs and just, I mean, mm-hmm. I don't want to get into it, but the thing is, the materialism is so ingrained in people that making them cop to this working class. They don't want to think of themselves as working class. They want to think of themselves as well dressed. They want to look like the celebrities that they admire so much. Mm-hmm. I put something up on my Facebook site. I get 2 hits. And this idiot, she put something up on Twitter about her brother's friend whose testicles swelled up, and she gets millions of hits. Mm-hmm. So you've got this whole that's the end game. The celebrity thing is like the mm-hmm. end game for this, but it's materialism all the way. It's like my son-in-law says, it's turtles all the way down. It's mm-hmm. materialism all the way, mm-hmm. and and that's really going to be difficult to combat because people are not going to want to back up in their ability to sort of live well, at least what they see living well is. And mm-hmm. that's why personal debt is so high. So
yeah,
personal debt's kind of a prison for them too. So,
mm-hmm. Well, this has been a really interesting general discussion of coming from the Sandinistas all the way to materialism and working class consciousness. We've covered the gamut of everything. We just went all the way across the board there. So we're going to go ahead and go back to a commercial break. You've been watching the Parrot TV show, The American Foreign Policy. Join us next Thursday. We'll continue the discussion as we have started today. We'll continue it next time. Thank you for joining us today. Hit the subscribe button while you're at it. Thanks.
I'm Eric Adams, and for me, this is where it all began. Some people talk about police brutality. I want to tell you how it is to live through it. We moved from Brooklyn to Queens when I was young. It was not always easy. As a child, I'll carry a garbage bag full of clothing to school, afraid that we would be evicted from our house for not paying the mortgage. When I was 15, my brother and I fell into trouble. We were arrested, and we were brought here to the 103rd Precinct in South Jamaica, Queens. One of the police officers stated, "How do you like a beatdown?" He brought us downstairs, and he beat us. He kicked us over and over again. When my mom came to get us, they said, "Leave them. They'll never amount to anything." That was a dark place. My life could have gone a different way, full of bitterness, but I had people who loved me and a determination to change things. So I became a police officer to bridge the gap between us, to make us all safer, and to take on systemic racism from within. It's why I took on police brutality while I was a police officer myself. Why I became a state senator to take on corruption and fight for civil rights for everyone. Fighting the rights for individuals merely to marry the people they love. And why I'm proud to serve as Brooklyn Borough President to make local government work for people again. We're in a dark place right now, a dark moment for New York and America. Whether it's the pandemic or violence in our streets, we don't feel safe. And too often, city government makes things worse, with inefficiency that leads to inequality and holds our people back. But I learned some time ago, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you're not buried, you're just planted. The question is, what are we going to do with the fruits of our harvest? I say it's time to grow, and that means it's time to rise up. I'm fired up! I'm fired up! The fight can't only be in the streets, it must also be in the agencies that patrol the streets. That is how we change policing. Over 600 shootings since June, and we have yet to see a comprehensive plan to stop having these communities live in terror. You do us no good merely walking down a block with us. You do us good walking into our businesses and giving us the economic stability that we can continue to grow. We will not allow the devastation of coronavirus to make us stay away from helping our neighbors. We're facing a crisis unlike anything we've ever seen before. Businesses are closing, crime is rising, homelessness is soaring, and our families are struggling. To be truly progressive and overcome these challenges, we have to fix government and eliminate the inefficiencies that are holding us back. We can't have an education system that fails to put our children on a pathway of success and leaves them at a dead end of crime and hopelessness. To revitalize our city, New Yorkers of all backgrounds need to feel safe and secure, that they'll have quality schools, affordable health care and housing, and a fair shot to get ahead. I spend my life tackling these issues, improving our communities, making New York families safer. Yes, we have big challenges, but we're New Yorkers. We respond, we take action, and with the right leadership, we will rise up again.
Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.